I'm curious about today. I've been on about something because I've been continuing to madly, in a humorous context, madly write the upcoming lessons for you all. Past the 8th, obviously, into the first degree. And it's an interesting process. Some of you are right at the threshold where you're about to have the 8th lesson, aren't you? Some of you are. And all I can say with that one is best of luck.
Okay.
Yeah, best of luck.
Not sure what that means.
Right. Hello, Jeffrey.
Hello.
All right. I'm just kind of spiraling into something here. I was saying that many of this audience are on lesson 7, about to bump into the 8th lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And all I can say with regard to the 8th lesson is best of luck. It's been fascinating, right? The writing the introductory part of things. From the standpoint of, I'm in the same boat you are, believe it or not. I really am in the same boat you are. After having reread some of the things that were written, I really want to point out that there's an aspect to this, what's showing up, that is completely non-human. We're very one-dimensional in our thinking. We're very, at least what's showing up is outside of my personal capabilities as, someone who goes to work, right? Cultural man, Chris being the life name. Yeah. It's very outside of that. And so when I say that I'm in the same boat you are, it's interesting for me to go back and actually read some of the things that have been written, through me, through my process, because I'm finding new things in it. And at times I'm like, oh, wow. Yeah. Like I didn't see how something tied in that was written, a month ago into something that was written a few days ago, until after it's already happened. And it just takes me back, right? Or I should say aback, A-B-A-C-K. It takes me aback a bit. And what it causes in me is a sense of humility, because something is really trying to get in. Something is really trying to set something right on this planet. And so I just feel very, very pleased to be a part of it, and feel very pleased that you all are a part of it as well. It's absolutely incredible to me. So I say it a bit with a smile. Good luck, yeah. Because when I went through lesson 8, which is upcoming for some of you, then having solved the riddle of it, it was just as profound for me as it will be for you. Yeah. That's about all I can say at this point in time, right?
Hey, Pierce.
Yes.
Hi.
Yes.
I'm very impressed with your writings. Just how precise and just well written. I'm curious to what you just said about, is it channeling through you?
Yep. Kind of.
I'm curious about that, because it's just very, very, very well processed, professional, just very well written, very clean.
Right.
And the concepts are very clean and clear. I just want to say thank you. It's and well done.
Well, yeah, sure. Thanks. I'll take that to a certain point. I'll take that to a certain degree, because I have worked very hard in my life to align myself to allow a process like that to happen. But what you're reading, as you'll notice at the end, I don't generally sign off as Pierce. And there's a reason for that. because it's not Pierce. If you, in fact, there are certain intelligence that surround this work that we do, intelligences, if you will, that surround this work that we do. One, some of you are familiar with. Its name was Toyer, right? You have the reference, Toyer. Toyer is an intelligence, is an intelligent being. It's not a, how do you put it? It's not a, I'm not sure the writer's term for it, but like a storytelling tool. And it was something that Leo connected to, and in a way, I mean, you can say it's almost like talking to aliens, isn't it? Right? I mean, because it's sort of what it is if you think about it from the more of the cultural standpoint. But yeah, things like this are really trying to help, and it raises the interesting question of why. Why are things trying to help? Because we humans have a very human concept of such a thing, right? When the United States goes into some foreign country and invades it and imposes the doctrines of democracy or capitalism or whatever the case might be, right, into these civilizations where that's a foreign signal, it does so under the guise of trying to help. Right? We're trying to help them achieve democracy. We're trying to help them with whatever. And that's not really the case, is it? Right? That's a very human view. What's really the case is an expansion of territory, is expansion of control. It's holding certain threats at bay, in the world. It's not actually helping. And we tend to put a view like that on all of creation. Yeah. Because I've made no secret of the fact that I'm in communication with things, right, that are generally speaking known as the Shining Ones, generally speaking, only because that's how they've always been known throughout all of history. And you have to ask the question, right, from a human standpoint, well, what do they want? But that's a very human question, because outside of the realm of cultural expression, right, that humans generate, you can really look to nature and see that things don't have an agenda, they have a function. Everything else in nature has a function, not an agenda, right? And if a certain type of fungus attacks a piece of wood that's fallen, right, and it begins to rot and it begins to do this, you can't say that the fungus has an agenda. You can't even say that the fungus wants something from the wood. It's in function, it's in process, right? And the planet is ultimately the benefactor of that particular process. And I put it in this kind of context that the things that we deal with in this are not, they're not out for gain in the way that you might think. They are just in function. Some of them are very, very ancient and unfortunately still in function. They should have retired eons ago. Literally, I mean that literally. They should have retired eons ago, but they can't. Because it's a life of service for them, and they haven't done what they needed to. And part of it's because we haven't had the uptake to do it, humans. So yeah, I mean it's a bit of a ramble. Molly, thank you. Yeah, thank you for saying that. And I'll take it to the point of what kind of alignments and assemblies I've been able to engender in myself to allow it to happen. But I can't take credit for the intelligence of it or what lives behind it.
Yeah. Well, that's I'm very curious about what you just said about your alignments and the processes to get you to the place to be able to channel or let something go through you to write it, So
yeah, it all starts exactly where we're all starting. Actually, it starts with the laws. It really does. It starts with the laws, because If you follow probably the most solid advice that the even or any other appearance of this signal ever made, it would be to fall in love with the laws. Everything else just gathers momentum from there. Now, see, that's really difficult to do because, especially if you've had an Eamon education, you probably don't know, you know of the laws, but you don't know what the laws are, what they actually do, except in a very abstract way. Yeah. And this is, I think, where there's been a breakdown, because it is actually possible to have inspiration without knowledge. I'll say that again because I think it's important. It's possible to have inspiration without knowledge. And inspiration is a fuel, but it works so much better with the knowledge to be able to do something with it. You see. People shun away from the term magic. Magic, ooh, like we're going to cast a circle and begin to chant things and all this sort of stuff. And the reality of it is, when you enter the realms of what's known as natural magic, what it is it's a practical application of natural law in one's life. That's all it is. I'll run through an example for you. It's going to take a bit of a run if you're willing. We've touched on it before, but I'll run through an example of what it's actually about if you're keen and willing. Yeah. Let's take the most misunderstood law, natural law, that appears on the planet, and it is the law of three. Now, I've had a conversation with a couple of you recently regarding the law of three, and it is the most completely misunderstood law, right? Natural law. People think, well, so there's this saying that humanity is third force blind. I talked about that last time. It's difficult to see what that third force is in things, and so you might take yourself out on a walk, and you might come across a thistle, right? Are you familiar with the thistle? Like they're very spiky plants, often purple, and yeah, right. And they're really, really beautiful to look upon. And they hurt if you try to grab one, if you try to pick it, smell it, interact with it in any physical way, they will harm you. Yeah. And the only cure is the milky sap that they produce. Now that's interesting, right? Because if you get pricked by one and you can cut into it and get some of that milky sap, that's what will actually alleviate the pain that pricked you. Go try it if you wish. No harm will come. But the point is that there's an example of something that we have called in the past the law of two, right? Where you've got thesis and antithesis all kind of rolled into one. But where is the third vector in that? See, this is what throws people. You can say, here you can actually say any number of things. You can say the third vector is the plant itself. Well, true. That's the medium in which it appears. Both of these poles appear. Or you could say the third vector is the idea of self-protection, right, for that plant. Because clearly it developed this defense mechanism to keep from being eaten readily by things that would come along and chew it up, like a cow, right? A cow's not going to touch the thing, Or you could say the third vector sits in any number of different places. And the reason why it's so difficult to determine is because there are actually 4 third vectors for every occurrence. There are 4 neutralizers for every occurrence. I'm going to see if I can get my camera to zoom in, so bear with me with my strange hand gestures. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. It's trying. Okay, last attempt. There it goes. Good. Yay. Yeah. technology. Okay, I did that because I need to go to the board for this. Now, let's take this, for example. I'll start with the example that I believe I gave before, which is you have a manifestation of the law of two, and we're going to call this hot, right? We'll pick up where we left off last week, and we call this cold. See the bar there? Now, hot and cold don't appear at the same point in the same thing, right? You can't have a rock that's hot and cold all at the same time. They're very fundamentally opposite one another. You can have a rock that is hot compared to your hand, right? Might be hot to the touch, while simultaneously being cold compared to the core of the planet, right? Freezing cold in comparison. But that's introducing something else. That's introducing an outside influence. In a single thing, hot and cold don't appear together. Right? They're fundamentally different. The same thing with the other aspect of it called wet and dry. Yeah? You don't have wet and dry in their ultimate forms appear at the same time in the same place, right? In something. But what these two things do, so here's two examples of the law of two. You've got hot and cold. This is one bar. We call this a bar, okay? You've got wet and dry. This is another bar. And what these two are doing is they're mediating one another. Because although you can't have, what do I mean by mediating one another? The law of three happens anytime one vector of the law of two intersects another vector of the law of two, all right? Or one bar intersects another bar of the law of two. Now, I've said in the past, nothing can manifest unless there are three forces involved. And that's true from a certain perspective, okay? Because when one bar mediates the other bar, it creates these various triangles that you can see if I were to connect these outside dots, these outside lines, I should say. This is where we search for the law of three. I'll take the example and I'll say, okay, so we now have third vectors going through the middle like this. And between hot and dry, you've got fire. Okay. Between dry and cold, you've got earth. Wet and cold, you've got water. And wet and hot air, right, in the form of steam, evaporation, things like that. So now you're talking about something that is actually sits within the realms of physical world. We have experience with things like fire. We have experience with things like air and earth and water, right? These are things that we can do. So while nothing in the universe can contain hot and cold at the same time, something in the universe, and even at planetary level, can contain hot and dry, you see. That would be fire. Something in the universe at planetary level can contain cold and dry, or wet and cold, or hot and wet. Yeah? Now, here's where the third vector comes into things, because we sit at this physical level where things manifest, this is our point of view. This is our perspective. Okay? So imagine if you were fire. What you would really perceive as opposites would be hot and dry at your level of perception. You see, you'd look to your left and you'd say, hot is over there. And you'd look to your right and say, dry is over there. They must be opposites. Now, this would be the intelligence of fire. Fire would have that perception. Water or air wouldn't have that perception. Air, for example, would see the opposite of hot to be wet because of its perspective. Are you all with me so far? It's an interesting way to think of it, isn't it? Now, you're not water, so you don't see it this way, all right? You see it differently because you are also, you're a bar as well. I'm going to grab this eraser. We're going to change some of the terms in here now. Okay. So we start with two elements of the law of two. Near and dear to us as humans is male and female. And one of the fundamental bars or aspects to life itself is birth and death. Would you agree? Huh? Would you agree? Yeah. These are two vectors intercepting each other in the phenomenon known as life, or planetary life, I should say. Okay. Most things show up here as a gender and have a birth and have a death, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah.
So now let's start breaking these vectors apart. Let's say male and death. Well, there you have father. The reason I say that is because he's more on the line towards death, right? Being older than birth, and more on the line of male than female. Yeah. Now you have death and female. So here you have mother. And male and birth, you've got boy or son. We'll say son in this example. And daughter. Okay. Now, those are the four neutralizing vectors of what happens when birth and death gets together with male and female. Yeah. Are you following now? Why the third vector is so hard to see? Because it depends on context and it depends on being able to identify the two forces that are crossing ways, yeah, that are coming into contact with each other. Now, there are many other things you can say, that come into contact with the male-female aspect, and that would, of course, create a different neutralizing vector, right? And so these are all occurring simultaneously within one another. Yeah, and so you can say from our perspective, because it is shifted, like I said before, we are part of this bar of life in here, that the opposite of father would be daughter. Yeah, the opposite of son would be mother. You see, not if you ask people, what's the opposite of father? Most of the time, people say mother. That's not true. Right? At least not in this kind of context. That's not true. They miss the third vector because they don't understand the forces at play. And this is what I really want to drive home for you, is that if you want to find the neutral vector in something, you have to first identify which two lines you're talking about, which two forces are crossing, are playing. Yeah? And then you can come up with the four possible neutral vectors sitting in this kind of area in here. Yeah, do you understand? What I'm doing is I'm just making various triangles. You've got positive, negative, neutral, and so on and so forth. But there's always going to be four of those. Yeah, they can take the form of bull, bird, lion, serpent, air, earth, water, fire, mother, father, son, daughter, north, south, east, west, you see? Or it should be north, the vectors between those, wouldn't it? Now, there's another aspect to this as well. When you talk about the law of two, there's generally speaking, anytime something crosses, something is willing to cross with something, it's because one is generally fixed, the other is generally mutable. What I mean by that is that we don't have an Eastern and Western hemisphere, do we? That's actually constantly changing, right? Because the planet rotates. That would be the mutable aspect to it. However, we do have a northern and southern hemisphere. That's the fixed aspect to it. Okay, so north-south decides to get together, right? The poles, the polarity, decides to get together with movement. And this is where you've got two crossings of the law of two that give us north, south, east, and west, and all of the vectors in between. Now, it's like that with a lot of things. Time generally is going to be the mutable that likes to merge or marry with something fixed, generally speaking. And you see it in the example of birth and death, time. Right? It's really an aspect of time at human level, isn't it? Shall we dig deeper now?
Yeah.
Is this interesting? Yeah. Is this going to give you something to look for? So we started off by talking about things like magic, and really, if you want something to manifest for you in your life, in your personal development journey, in whatever the case might be, it takes more than inspiration. It takes a certain degree of intelligence to know which forces you're working with. You have to identify which two vectors are doing this cross. And then you have to amplify or push into one or another, depending on what kind of outcome you want. Now we're going to take this diagram and we're going to take it in a completely different way again.
Hey, Pierce,
Yes.
a question. So
Yeah.
are you saying that it's best to identify the 4 planes before determining the third vector?
Kind of. What I'm saying is that you have to identify the two fundamental forces that are crossing to begin with. Two polarities, right? Because polarities don't show up here. They just don't. They have to be mitigated or mediated by something. And so if you're ever going to understand or look for the third vector in something, you have to know what two ingredients are coming into it to begin with. Makes sense. Yeah, good. Okay, let's go back to the octave now. One of my favorite topics. Let's take this exact same diagram and apply to it the musical notes. And this will tie into the Enneagram in a moment. Okay, you'll see something here in a moment. But you have do here, re, mi. And then what happens? Right? Do you remember the law? Do, re, mi, shock, or stop, right? Something has to enter at that point. So this is what enters here. We'll just draw it like a little squiggly line. And then you've got fa, sol, la, si. And then something enters here. Now, what's interesting or very incredible about this is that this entrance also covers what happens between si and do here, if you draw the Enneagram in this kind of form. All right. Now, let's put those things back to it again. We've got male and female. So we've got father. We'll say father here. At do. Right? Mother down here? No. Hold on. Yeah, we've got male and female. Sorry. Father's not there. This is male at do. Female at fa. Okay? And then we've got birth at la and death at me. Now this raises something interesting. So we had male and death. We call this father, right? We've got female and death, mother. Now all this already, if you're sharp to this, something will start to trigger in you because of where mother sits. You see, you've got daughter and son. Now that's interesting, right? Now you can begin to break down the idea of family in this context. You see, and really begin to get an appreciation about what the most important member of that family unit is when it comes to being able to progress things, when it comes to being able to complete the octave. In this example, would sit at the vector of mother, which doesn't have a note associated with it. It's part of that shock, yeah? And you can go into history and you can go into cultural examples. It was always the mother that was the glue that holds the family together. Yeah, it's always the mother. Us men, oh my God, Yeah, if we didn't have that and we were trying to just hold things together, oh, we'd all be, drunk at the bar by now, wouldn't we? Right? It's the ladies that help us, isn't it? Yeah. So I'm giving you an example, okay? This is not doctrine. I'm just saying that if you have the groundwork and have the ability to work things out, and you can see where these lines cross, you can begin to get certain insights like that. Yeah. And this should tell you that in these two merging vectors, if a family's not doing well, you need to put more support into the mother, because that will enrich and nurture everything else in the family. Yeah, right? So now let's go back to the idea of magic. And we're going to completely demystify this. Knowing what you know here and being able to come to an idea like this, that the mother role in this context represents that point of shock in the octave of things, then how could you not perform magic now, right? Because you have the ability with this kind of information to alter the circumstances of something. You can enhance the family life, for example, if you understand the mechanics of what's going on here. So I demystified it, right? It's not drawing a circle and doing incantations and all this sort of thing. It's being able to intelligently work with the forces at play, which starts with being able to see what forces are at play. Now, that's just another way of drawing this. We'll talk about it. Another way that's been looked at before is in the idea of an Enneagram. Okay, Enneagram. And you have Do, Re, Do, Re, yeah, Mi. This is just going to be a little bit different because it can't get through here. Here's where the shock comes in, okay? In this part of the triangle here. Then you got Fa, Sol, La, and Si. I should have done this in a different color so you can tell that they're different symbols. Let me try and overtrace this. So this is where magic happens, do you see? That's where you have to put in a special ingredient, is that transition between Mi and Fa, at least in the beginning. The next one happens up here at Si and Do. Now, does anyone understand? Can anyone explain to me why there's not a triangle here? Why there's not, like in the Enneagram, why there's a shock here? Because there is a possible point of stoppage between Si and Do. That's where the second shock occurs. So why is this symbol wrong? Or I should say not wrong. Why is this symbol incomplete? Oh, I love you. I love all of you so much. Yeah, this is like so fundamental and something that you should definitely have. You should definitely have this. All right, because it's going to open up everything for you in the long run. It's because this shock here starts a new octave. Okay, just like Do sits at the top of the triangle, Do now sits. Let's draw it this way. It's a little more convenient. Okay, so you go Do to Re, Re to Mi, Mi to Fa, Fa to Sol, La, Si, and then back to Do. You can see the kind of transition in there. Right now, what happens here is because you've introduced a new force at this point of shock to allow me to get to Fa, it sounds the note Do. Do you see? And this sounds Re. And this sounds Mi. And now it has a difficulty here, right where the other point of the triangle is. Okay? And if it's able to bridge that, then fa, sol, la, si, and so on and so forth. But if you introduce the right signal for the second octave, right, the one in blue, at the right point, which would be at this part of the triangle, now what you've done is said do, right, re, mi, and then of course the shock sits here. You understand why this symbol is incomplete? Because it only shows you partial. It only shows you a partial truth in there. And I would guarantee you, well, you'll be able to draw the full symbol if you really put your minds to this. You have enough information now to be able to draw the proper Enneagram. And I will tell you that there are probably 3 or 4 people on the planet currently that can do that, except for you. You can do it. You have all the information you need to do that now. So anytime you see an Enneagram, the way it's generally presented, it's an incomplete picture, and it was done so specifically. Yeah, because if you put in the rest of the details in there, it suddenly becomes extremely powerful. Yeah, probably, yeah.
So I don't have this in my thinking. It is kind of coming intuitively.
Okay.
So in there, for the octave, will comes into play.
Yeah.
And this creates also a wobble and a spiral.
Now, you need to back that up and put some thinking into it, because you are absolutely right, but you failed to identify which 2 vertices we're talking about here. Yeah, because will definitely can come into it.
Yeah.
But it depends on which forces are at play. And you don't have to answer it now, but that's
Okay.
the next step for you.
Right.
Yeah, is to be able to do this. Now, you know, you can take this. I mean, if you take all of the points, this is just so incredible. So incredible. If you take all of these points that touch, right, all of them, where they touch the triangle and so on and so forth, they touch in 12 points. Now you're talking about astrology, you see, and you can unlock astrology with this, or at least the first level of it. They touch in more points once you complete the symbol. But yeah, I mean, so now you've got astrology in there. And you could actually, if you understood this, you could go back and reinvent astrology had it not been invented. You could actually piece it together and understand where those forces are really coming into play in the universe. It's not what the back of a magazine or newspaper says, right? It's not the one-liner that you'll get in the astrology section. This is real, the real deal.
So looking at this, I guess.
Listen. Before you go there, do you understand that if you know the natural laws, you can go back and rework anything.
Yeah.
But then it becomes you. It becomes part of you, right? You're no longer talking, for example, about the astrology invented 8,000 years ago. Yeah, that has little application today because everything's shifted and moved on. But if you know the laws at play, you can go back and rework anything and figure it out for what it is right now. Yeah. And this has to do with healing. It has to do with everything. Tarot, if you want to make your own tarot, you start with the laws. If you want to understand how to induce an atmosphere, you start with the laws. If you want to understand how to create an assembly within yourself that's responsive to those higher things in creation that allow works to come through and be manifest, right, Molly? Starts with the laws. So this is why I say fall in love with the laws, if you will, please. Yeah, and have you ever had it put this way before?
No.
And to me, that's a shame. It should have been put this way to you, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it was, on day 1 or day 5 or something like that at the very latest. Yeah, because this is where it all falls out from. If you look at something like Leo's works, like the Green Knowings or the Yellow Contemplations, if you have the reference in there, and you go, how did that man get to this, right? Or how did that man get to Gemrod? Or how did that man get to whatever occurred through him? It's because of this. Yeah. And if he can do it, you can do it. You really can. You have all the same faculties he was born with. Yeah. If I can do it, you can do it. And that's what this is about. This isn't about me teaching you anything, except for maybe just like the fundamentals, right? You're a kid in school and you have to learn that 1 + 1 = 2 and 2 + 2 = 4 and so on and so forth. You have to learn those basics, which are irrefutable, really, yeah, to a child. I mean, you give them 4 beans, you give them 2 beans, and you give them 2 more beans, and they can count for themselves that they now have 4. They can prove to themselves that 2 + 2 = 4. It's not some abstract thing. Beautiful, isn't it? What a beautiful work. Nothing you can't do. Nothing you can't do if you get this. And this is just one way of doing that 8-sided figure that I started off with. You see that? Well, where do we go from here? Probably be almost enough, wouldn't it? Yeah. Who wants to spin us?
Just a curio. Fa, father, fa, father.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
the thought.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, and you can take, I don't have it up anymore, but you can take those things and see, like, where they sit in the spectrum of things, right? Because you can map this then back to the ray of creation, for example. You see, superimpose with that father, mother, son, daughter type of thing, and see what elements. And really, a family is a universe, isn't it? You kind of create your own little universe in there. That's your whole spectrum, and it all revolves around mom. Clarity, this is in celebration of you, right? And all the other mothers out there. Yeah. I see you blushing just slightly off my screen. Half of you. Well, so you just learned about the entire universe in 43 minutes. Everything you need to know in 43 minutes. But of course, it comes down to actually doing the work of it, doesn't it? But see, now you can walk away from this meeting and you have new tools. If you want to change something in your life, please look at the forces at play and then intelligently put a scoop of whatever it is that you need into it. It's as simple as it is. Your life can rain magic if you do that. Think about it this way. I mean, fire to a primitive culture. Fire, right? That's magic to a culture that has never seen fire. But it's based on law, right? If you take a stick or a flint or whatever the case is, however you decide to make it, and you use it in a certain way, you create some astounding effect. Fire. Now, because, we can just light a match, it's not so magical to us, but it should be from that standpoint, because it's an intelligent use of the forces and, things at play. I'll tell you, you don't know what you're capable of once you get this. You don't know what you can really do with this. I mean that, you don't know what you can do. You can create fire, right? Or analogically speaking, you can create fire. Analogy. Is this something you can actually work with or begin to work with? Yeah, I think so too. The reason why people, just kind of bringing things full circle, the reason why people don't generally look or understand the law of three is because we start with something that's already the result. You know, remember I had this going on here with the hot, cold. That's a terrible H. I don't like that. Hot, cold, wet, dry. And then we have these vectors, right, where you've got the 4 elements in there. The problem is that people start here because you have to. If you want to understand something in life, you can't understand something that's non-manifest. You see, we have fire here, don't we? I'll go back to this. Earth, water, and air. This is where we sit here. Okay, so when you're looking for the law of three, you're already looking at what's been manifest in the universe. And if you really want to understand it, you have to identify these things. You understand? So you look at something in your life, right? You look at tarot or fire. We'll keep it simple, okay? You look at fire and you think, oh, I really want to open this up. And I'm using fire as an analogy for anything that you want to open up. And you think to yourself, I should begin to investigate the law of three with it. And you come up with water, fire and water, right? They have an opposite effect on each other, if you will. Okay. And so already you're off kilter. You're already off kilter because you have missed the entirety of what's going on here with this. You don't see, by concentrating this on these vectors here, you're not seeing what's really at play. You're not seeing the forces at play, which are hot and cold, which can't manifest by themselves, simultaneously, and wet and dry, which again can't manifest. These are forces coming through. They don't exist here unless they interact with each other. But this is where we go wrong, right? We start to investigate fire and we think, what's the opposite? And then what mitigates that? And you say, oh, well, fire and water. What must be the neutral vector is a pot, right? Because that's what can keep fire and water separated and allow it to boil. But that's not it. You see, you're missing the occult. You're missing the hidden. I mean, occult in the sense of the definition of the word. You're missing what's occult about it. You're missing the hot, cold, wet, dry aspects that really unlock it. That's what's difficult, is to see the forces at play that have not been manifest, that can't manifest without each other. That's where the difficulty comes in. And guess who taught me all that?
Who?
Or what, right? These things that attend this work now. Yeah. I didn't invent this. I didn't think of this. I didn't read it in a book. That's for damn sure. Yeah. Never heard it in a lecture. It's, you get it, right? Things just start to come through, you see. I find this beautiful. Huh?
Peers taught peers.
Peers taught peers. Yeah, well, something taught something, obviously. But yeah. But do you see, it wouldn't have been possible if I didn't do a bit of digging and do a bit of work in this. Even though I can't take credit for the outcome of it, I can certainly take credit for the effort I put into it in the beginning. Yeah.
Can I say something?
Yeah, please. Molly?
Also, you've got northwest, east, south.
Mm-hmm.
News,
yes.
the new
Yes.
news, northeast, west, south.
All around the planet.
On that, that falls into that form.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can for sure take it the same way. Ugh. All right, are we good? There we go. So like you said, we've got north and south. And west and east. So embarrassing if I got that one wrong, right? Go on certain side. And then you've got these vectors in between. Now, this is a really good example of something I said earlier, because you've got something fixed, don't you? North and south. You take a compass, it's fixed. You've got north that way, south that way, and that's the way it is. But how do you identify what's happening through west and east? You've got something changing, something going through it. Yeah. And if you want to end up anywhere on the planet, you have to take all of these into account, don't you? If you want to end up here in America, right, here in Colorado, here at my front door, then on some level, you're going to have to take into consideration all of these forces that are at play, right? There's a certain latitude and longitude and so on and so forth. Those are the invisible forces. The visible is my house or your house, you see. Yeah. What's occult is north, south, east, west. We don't think in those terms necessarily. And we certainly can't necessarily sense it either, right? You can't go, oh yeah, that's west. I mean, you could actually. I'm not saying you can't. You really can. But what I'm saying is that it's not, that would be an occult thing, wouldn't it? Yeah, to be able to like turn until you know that you've suddenly, suddenly lined up with the magnetic ley lines of the planet. That's occult, isn't it? Right. But we don't think in those terms, right? It's like, where do you build your house? Somewhere in this matrix there. Yeah. All right. I'm going to keep it short today. Short and heavy. Like a little fat person, short and heavy. Yeah. I have a cat. That's very short and heavy. Walkie. Yeah. Are you okay with that? We keep it short and heavy.
Yeah.
But I hope there's a lightness and a buoyancy in the heaviness of it. And one thing I've been trying to give or allow to pass through me is my own sense of inspiration about these sorts of things. Yeah, so that you can just go away and go, wow, right? I've never had the laws that way before. Really make you want to go out and figure them out.
Pierce, it seems like the forces could be oriented differently. Like, what makes the male on top and the female on bottom, or the dry, because the shock position is important, it seems like.
Yeah.
And so how do you approach the orientation of the forces?
Yeah, you're correct, and especially when it comes with which way the vector is the crossing vector is implemented, right? Because it doesn't matter. You could put north or south at the top, but it does matter with the way east and west go through, if that makes sense. Now, what this relies on really, Kimberly, is the sensitivity to what those two forces are like, the polarities are like. And we break it down into just positive and negative without any, what's the term? Without any loaded content behind that, just in terms of magnetic forces. And you see that the male force, the positive force, tends to be more transmissive, and the female force tends to be more receptive, just energetically speaking. Okay. Negative was one of those words that's tough, isn't it? Because, say, oh, why are you so negative today? Right? It has a dual meaning sometimes. Yeah. Why are you so receptive today? Be an odd thing to say, wouldn't it? But yes, you're absolutely right from that standpoint. And also, you take this diagram, this father, mother, son, daughter type of diagram that we had up there before, and you can begin to get a sense of, if you are the mother, if you are the daughter, then that changes the relationship of everything around it. You know, just like in the ancient times, a lot of ancient cultures thought that, well, let me put it this way. Ancient cultures knew the truth. In relatively recent ancient times, they thought that the planet was the center of the universe and everything orbited around it, right? And so you've got the fixed stars in the sky because they're always basically where they are. And then you've got the wanderers, the 7 wanderers, right? The planets, which are like appearing all over the place because you don't understand that you're part of that, you see. But if you are one of these things involved in this, then your perspective is going to be different. You'll feel like that fixed planet where everything wanders around you, and it changes the nature of how you view the diagram. But sometimes it's important to push back, zoom out, right? And see how they all interact with each other instead of how one interacts with the rest. You are perfectly right, though, in that observation. All right. Have I left you something to play with? All right. Any questions? Anyone want to chime in at the end here? You all look stunned. Yeah. All right. Thank you all for joining. I think next weekend is Christmas, so we won't be having this. But feel free to reach out via email if you want some one-on-one time with me. Please contact me by email, and we'll set something up. Okay. All right. Merry Christmas to all. Happy Saturnalia, or however you choose to celebrate that. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.